The Evil Within. Chapter 1. Detective Sebastian Castellanos pulled up to the front gates of Beacon Mental Hospital in his unmarked police cruiser. The imposing Gothic architecture of the asylum loomed before him through the heavy rain that had begun falling. He had been called to investigate a potential homicide, according to the vague dispatch report, but Sebastian knew better than to take any call to Beacon lightly. In his many years on the force, Sebastian had been to the notorious asylum more times than he cared to recall. And it was never for anything good. As he stepped out into the stormy night, Sebastian pulled his trench coat tighter and tried to shake off his sense of foreboding dread. His partners, Joseph and Kidman, were already on scene, having arrived earlier to assess the situation. Kidman stood sheltered under an umbrella, while Oda was crouched examining something on the ground. "Castellanos, about time we could use you in there," Kidman greeted Sebastian brusquely. He was used to her all-business demeanor by now. "Good to see you too, Kidman." The dispatcher was a little vague. "What's the story?" Sebastian asked as he ducked under the umbrella beside her. Kidman nodded towards the heavy front doors where two uniformed officers stood guard. "It's bad in there, Sebastian. Really bad. 11 bodies so far, maybe more." Sebastian raised an eyebrow. Kidman wasn't one to exaggerate or scare easily. 11 bodies, Jesus. Any details on how they died, witnesses? Too early to say for certain. But it looks like extreme violence based on the sheer number of victims. No survivors that we know of yet who actually saw the killings. We only got called because a janitor came across the first body half an hour ago, Kidman explained. Sebastian gazed up at the imposing facade of Beacon. It was hard to imagine the horrors that must lay within. But he steeled himself to enter the scene and begin piecing together this mystery. "Let Oda finish up out here documenting evidence. You and I will start a sweep inside. See if we can find any survivors, witnesses, or clues about what the hell happened." Chapter 2. Sebastian stepped through the front entrance of Beacon Mental Hospital with his gun drawn. Kidman followed close behind with her weapon ready as well. The scene that awaited them was chilling. Blood streaked the walls of the foyer and front reception area. Shattered glass and debris were scattered across the floor. The metallic tang of blood hung thick in the air, and several mutilated corpses lay ripped open savagely among the wreckage. Sebastian had investigated countless homicide scenes over his career, but this level of carnage seemed unreal. It looked more like the handiwork of wild animals than a human killer. As he and Kidman slowly cleared the reception area, a noise from their right made them both spin, aiming their guns. Sebastian breathed a small sigh of relief when he realized it was just a security guard taking cover behind the reception desk. "Police, are you hurt?" Sebastian called out as he approached slowly, his gun still raised in caution. The guard peered out, trembling with terror in his eyes. No, I'm okay, thank God you're here." He was clearly in shock. "I'm Detective Castellanos. This is my partner, Kidman. What's your name?" Sebastian said gently as he helped the man stand up. Ethan Paulson, the guard stammered, looking like he might crumble back to the floor at any moment. Kidman stepped forward, her manner clinical and firm. "Paulson, we need you to tell us what happened here. Take a breath and walk us through it step by step." The guard nodded, steadying himself against the desk. It was just a normal night. Until maybe an hour ago when I heard these terrible screams. Patients shrieking. I ran to check our security monitors, but most of the cameras were just static. The ones that worked showed these things attacking people, ripping them apart. Did you see who or what was attacking them? Sebastian asked intently as Kidman took notes. Paulson shook his head, looking dazed. It was like bloody shadows, moving almost too quick to see. Then Mike from the night shift burst in, shouting to run. That's when I hid here. Sebastian and Kidman exchanged an unsettled look. The attacker or attackers sounded inhumanly fast and vicious based on the state of the bodies strewn about. These things you saw, did they look like people, animals? Can you describe them in any more detail? Sebastian pressed, hoping for any clue no matter how small. The guard just kept shaking his head in disbelief. I don't know. It was all shadows and blurring motion. All I heard were screams and tearing sounds over the monitor speakers. It was a goddamn slaughterhouse. Kidman finished jotting down notes. All right, Paulson, we're going to do a full sweep of this place room to room. I need you stay put here until backup officers arrive. Sebastian nodded in agreement. He could tell the man was in no shape to go with them into the depths of this nightmare. As he turned to continue clearing the hospital, Sebastian quietly chambered a round in his pistol. Chapter 3. Sebastian and Kidman advanced carefully through the blood-spattered halls of Beacon Mental Hospital, weapons ready. The emergency lighting bathed everything in an eerie red glow. All around them were signs of pandemonium and carnage. Bloody handprints streaked down the walls in some places. Bullet holes from the guards' desperate attempts to stop the attackers riddled the ceilings and doorways. And they passed numerous mangled corpses along the way, at patients and staff alike torn to shreds. They cleared room after room, finding no survivors. Only acts of unspeakable violence that made Sebastian's skin crawl. He had never seen such brutal deaths, organs torn from bodies, faces ripped off, limbs and bones snapped by inhuman force. My God, what could have done this? Kidman whispered as they entered a day room that resembled an abattoir. Severed limbs and torsos lay scattered about like broken dolls. The killers had been thorough. Not one patient had been left alive. Sebastian just shook his head, equally at a loss. In all his years investigating homicide scenes, nothing compared to the shocking carnage at Beacon. As they left the day room, Sebastian spotted a nearby security office. Let's check in there, see if we can get a look at whatever the hell did this on the camera feeds, he suggested. Inside the security office, the wall of monitors still flickered with snowy static and glimpses of crimson-splashed corridors. Sebastian rewound the footage, looking for any clues about what unfurled this madness. There, Kidman said, pointing as several humanoid shapes appeared on camera stalking the halls. They moved with strange, twitchy motions. And when they attacked victims, it was with frightening speed, rending flesh in the blink of an eye. Sebastian felt his blood turn to ice as he watched the killers prowl Beacon's halls. They seemed to be humanoid in basic shape, though taller with bizarrely elongated limbs. But the way they moved was all wrong, disjointed and erratic, like vicious animals hunting prey. He had no idea what they could be. Not human, but not any animal he recognized either. Just monstrous things that delighted in eviscerating every living being in their path. Sebastian prayed he and Kidman wouldn't encounter them in the flesh. My God, Sebastian, what the hell are those things? Kidman asked, voicing his own dread. Sebastian checked his gun grimly. I don't know, but if we see them, shoot to kill. Chapter 4. Sebastian and Kidman continued their cautious room-to-room sweep of Beacon Mental Hospital, finding only more bloody evidence of slaughter. The mysterious humanoid killers had been brutally thorough, and not a single survivor remained that they could find. The clinical halls of the asylum had become a house of horrors. Overturned gurneys, shattered observation windows, scattered medical charts, all covered in blood. It was a nightmare come to life. As they approached the hospital's hydrotherapy area, Sebastian noticed an eerie silence hanging over the ward. The only sounds were the occasional drips of blood from nearby walls and their own tense breathing. Too quiet, Sebastian thought. He signaled Kidman to halt with a raised fist. Scanning the area ahead, his instincts told him something was wrong. Sebastian slowly swept his flashlight beam over the hydrotherapy room entrance just up ahead. A large metal tub had been overturned, its rusted bottom stained dark crimson. The heavy iron shackles that had once chained patients still hung empty from the walls. But what made Sebastian freeze was a tall, humanoid silhouette standing perfectly still at the far end of the room. "Kidman, on me," he whispered. They flanked the doorway, guns aimed warily at the unmoving figure within. At Sebastian's signal, they swung into the entrance, flashlights and pistols trained ahead. Sebastian's flashlight illuminated the silhouette, revealing one of the freakishly tall, pale-skinned killers they had seen on the security footage. It stood swaying slowly, then turned to face them. Sebastian stared into its inhuman eyes and felt his blood turn to ice. The thing's face was a horrific mesh of torn flesh and exposed musculature. Its limbs were unnaturally elongated, ending in gnarled claws. And it stared at them with pure, sightless malice, lips peeling back to reveal blood-stained teeth. Then it let out an ear-splitting shriek and charge, moving with uncanny speed. Kidman and Sebastian opened fire, retreating backward and trying to stop its frenzied advance. But their bullets barely slowed the monster down before it collapsed and writhed grotesquely in a spreading pool of its own black blood. Panting, Sebastian watched it warily for any signs of movement. But the thing lay still, dead for the moment. Kidman turned to him, eyes wide. "Sebastian, what the hell was that thing?" Sebastian just shook his head. He had no answers, only a creeping dread that they had stumbled into evil beyond understanding. He was about to reply when a searing pain exploded in the back of his skull. Sebastian collapsed, dimly aware of Kidman crying out before everything went black. Chapter 5. Consciousness returned slowly to Sebastian through a pounding ache in his skull. He blinked open his eyes and found himself lying on a grimy tile floor, staring up at a crumbling ceiling. Harsh fluorescent lights flickered above, revealing the filthy ruins surrounding him. "Where am I?" Sebastian thought groggily. The last thing he remembered was being at Beacon Mental Hospital with Kidman, investigating the massacre, then that freakish monstrosity had attacked them in the hydrotherapy room. After that, only darkness. Had they even survived the encounter? Kidman's distressed shouts, as he blacked out, echoed hauntingly in Sebastian's mind. He slowly pulled himself upright, fighting down a wave of nausea. His pistol and flashlight were gone. The only item on his belt was a heavy wrench. "I'll take what I can get," Sebastian thought grimly. The room around him looked nothing like Beacon Hospital. Flaking paint, grime-streaked tile, and strange machinery lined the walls. Rusty metal doors with broken locks provided the only exits. Red emergency lamps cast everything in hellish hues. Sebastian strained to glimpse any clues about where he was through the filthy windows lining one wall. But a swirling gray void lay outside. No help there. Cautiously testing one of the doors, Sebastian entered a trash-strewn hallway beyond. Like the initial room, it was foreign yet eerily familiar. As if these twisted surroundings were cobbled together from Sebastian's own dark dreams and memories into a nightmarish realm. I have to find Kidman and get the hell out of this place, Sebastian thought. Skulking through the maze of debris-filled corridors, Sebastian soon realized he was not alone here. Strange noises echoed from side rooms, raspy breathing, bestial snarls, skittering footsteps. This place felt alive with things lurking just out of sight. When the first shriek rang out nearby, Sebastian gripped the wrench tighter. He turned just in time to see 3 distorted, savage creatures come charging down the hall at him. Their limbs were elongated, skin corpse pale, and milky eyes overflowing with blood. No escape. Sebastian roared a cry of defiance and charged to meet the nightmare creatures head-on. Chapter 6. Sebastian slammed the heavy wrench down again and again into the last creature's skull until it finally stopped twitching. Panting, he staggered back from the broken corpses now littering the hallway. The pale, emaciated things had moved with uncanny speed and ferocity. But Sebastian's wrench and determination to survive had prevailed. Barely. Wiping sweat and blood from his eyes, Sebastian continued navigating the nightmare maze. He had to find an exit from this place. Wherever this place really was. The twisting corridors and rooms seemed to shift and transform subtly with each turn Sebastian took. Walls elongated, new doorways appeared. Previously searched chambers closed off as if the building itself was alive. And around every corner, more horrors lay waiting. Soon the wrench grew slick in Sebastian's grip as he crushed and battered his way through wave after wave of the monstrosities. They came at him from the darkness with claws outstretched and obscene mouths gaping. But he would not die cowering. If this was a nightmare, he would face its horrors head-on. After an eternity of combat through constantly shifting rooms, Sebastian slumped against a wall to rest. His whole body ached, and his limited ammunition was running low. But he couldn't give up. He had to find a way out. Checking his wristwatch, Sebastian frowned. The hands spun erratically as if time itself was broken here. Glancing at a nearby window, that same oppressive gray fog still obscured any view of where exactly he was trapped. An ominous skittering sound echoed nearby, jolting Sebastian alert again. He forced himself to his feet, wrench at the ready. Another pale humanoid crawled across the ceiling toward him like a grotesque insect. With a roar, Sebastian charged forward to continue the fight. If anyone else was trapped here, Kidman, Joseph, other survivors from Beacon, he had to find them. Sebastian clung to that sense of duty like a lifeline. It fueled him onward through the ceaseless halls and rooms that stretched on into infinity. He would find a way out of this nightmare labyrinth or die trying. Chapter 7. Sebastian continued battling his way through the sprawling nightmare maze. He had long ago lost track of how many twisting halls he had traversed and creatures he had destroyed. This place truly seemed endless. Pausing to catch his breath in a debris-strewn back room, Sebastian tried the radio on his belt again. Only static answered his calls. No response from Kidman or Joseph. He feared what might have happened to them in this hellish place. But he couldn't give up hope yet. Sebastian's thoughts turned to escaping this nightmare and returning to the real world. Surely whatever demon had spawned this place had limits. There must be an exit somewhere amid the endless permutations of rooms and corridors. With wary hope, Sebastian moved on, searching for any sign of escape. Strange memories and experiences bled through from his past into the surroundings: his childhood bedrooms, the police academy, murder scenes from old cases. It was as if the environment was sampling Sebastian's mind and reconstructing it. After fighting through several more chambers full of pale, shrieking creatures, Sebastian came across something new. A heavy metal door labeled exit at the end of a refuse-choked hallway. It had to be a trap, but he still rushed forward. Any promise of escape gave him a surge of desperate hope. Yanking the door open, Sebastian recoiled as a wall of flames erupted before him. The raging inferno consumed the entire adjoining room. Sebastian stared into the roiling fire and for a moment saw the shadowy shape of a child, arms outstretched, silently screaming. He stumbled back and slammed the door shut. Sebastian realized the child's silhouette had looked eerily like a young Ruvik. Strange that a vision from the past life of that infamous serial killer would appear here. It felt like more than coincidence. Shaking off the vision, Sebastian pressed on down another lightless passage. The exit door had only been a sadistic trick. But the fact some intelligence was toying with him here gave Sebastian a new sense of purpose. He would find whoever was behind this nightmare and make them pay. Chapter 8. Traversing deeper into the sprawling complex, Sebastian began assembling pieces of this nightmarish puzzle. The shifting runes sampled from his memories meant someone or something was digging around in his head. But who? And for what twisted purpose? Rounding a corner, Sebastian saw a trail of blood, the first he'd encountered here besides from his own battles. He followed cautiously, wrench at the ready. The gory trail ended at a heavy metal door that stood slightly ajar. Inside, Sebastian found a recording studio with heavy soundproofing foam on the walls. A microphone on a stand pointed at a large, two-way mirror along one wall. But what drew Sebastian's gaze was the body. One of the security guards from Beacon Mental Hospital lay slumped below the window in a pool of blood. Rushing over, Sebastian checked for a pulse, but found none. The man was long dead, his torso ripped open savagely. Sebastian carefully examined the rest of the room, looking for any clues about the guard's death or how he came to be in this nightmare place. Strange glowing cables snaked from the walls into the man's bloodied corpse. It reminded Sebastian of the bizarre syringe device he had seen the pale creatures trying to operate on victims. Was someone conducting experiments here? Using the strange technology to extract people's thoughts and memories against their will? Sebastian didn't understand the full scope of this sinister operation yet, but his desire to put an end to it grew stronger. Leaving the recording studio, Sebastian followed more bloody trails through the convoluted halls until coming upon what looked like an old barn from his childhood. A large metal apparatus that resembled a transmitter tower dominated the interior. Sebastian recognized it from an old case a serial killer named Hoffman had built the tower in an effort to control minds. Sebastian watched cautiously as the machine crackled with arcane energy. The implications were chilling. If someone had reconstructed Hoffman's device here, they were likely using it to siphon people's minds, even reshape reality itself to torment victims. Sebastian rushed to smash the tower before it could harm anyone else. As he wrecked the last of the apparatus, an inhuman shriek of rage echoed through the complex. Lights flickered and blood began leaking down walls, as if the building itself was wounded. Sebastian had struck a critical blow against whatever dark intelligence operated this place. He pushed on with renewed vigor, descending through maintenance tunnels and increasingly experimental-looking labs. Sebastian was close now. Soon he would find whoever had constructed this high-tech house of horrors and make them pay. Sebastian crept through the dark maintenance tunnels, following cables and tubes that seemed to run like veins throughout the complex. He was getting close to the heart of this nightmare. Up ahead, Sebastian heard voices and saw light spilling from a half-open door. Drawing his wrench, he approached cautiously and peered inside. It appeared to be some kind of control room, filled with terminals, screens, and complex machinery. But what drew Sebastian's eye were the two figures standing amidst it all, Joseph and Kidman. His missing partners were here after all. Before he could call out to them, Sebastian noticed the way they muttered and shuffled around erratically, as if in a trance. Strange glowing cables snaked from the machines and into ports along Joseph and Kidman's necks. They were being controlled. Sebastian realized whoever was masterminding this place must have Kidman and Joseph captive now. He would have to find a way to free them without alerting their puppeteer. Studying the room, Sebastian began to formulate a plan. He spotted a large junction box nearby that fed power to the control terminals. If he could cause a disruption there, it might break the hold over his partners briefly. Moving as stealthily as possible, Sebastian made his way into the room while Joseph and Kidman had their backs turned. He raised the wrench and brought it down hard on the junction box in a shower of sparks. The room went dark, machines powering down. Joseph and Kidman gasped and stumbled, regaining control of themselves. In the shadows, Sebastian called out to them. "It's me, we have to move now." There was no time to waste explaining. Grabbing his partners, Sebastian pulled them out of the control room and into the dark maintenance tunnels just as emergency lights kicked on behind them. They had to put distance between themselves and the puppeteer before he could re-establish control. Chapter 9. Together with his partners once again, Sebastian hurried to escape the control room and its mysterious master. But questions still plagued his mind. "That bastard's has got us trapped here, using us," Joseph said, voicing Sebastian's own thoughts. He and Kidman still seemed disoriented from their ordeal. "Do either of you remember how you got here?" Sebastian asked hopefully. Kidman shook her head, rubbing her temples. "It's hazy. Last thing I recall was Beacon, then waking up in that room." Joseph murmured similar fractured memories. Sebastian quickly filled them in on the nightmarish complex and his theories about stolen memories shaping it. Whoever orchestrated this place was digging around in their minds against their will. Passing a shattered window, Sebastian glimpsed a shifting vista of ghostly buildings and forests outside. "This whole world seems artificial. We have to find a way back to reality," he said. "Back to reality," Joseph muttered. "If we got pulled into someone's consciousness, could destroying their mind allow us to escape?" It was a dark thought, but one Sebastian had already considered. They had few other options. First, we need to figure out whose twisted head we're trapped inside. The answer came as they entered a grand foyer adorned with disturbing anatomical figures and moth specimens. Sebastian recognized it all too well. Ruvik's mansion. These are memories from inside his mind. Sebastian exclaimed. The clues were falling into place about their imprisonment here. Kidman looked uneasy. Ruvik is dead, though, isn't he? Sebastian had no easy answer. Either they were trapped in recordings of Ruvik's memories, or, even more disturbing, in a living manifestation of his consciousness itself. We should search the mansion, maybe find his brain core, something tangible we can use against him, Joseph suggested. Sebastian nodded. Stay alert. Ruvik could try manipulating any of his memories to attack us. Chapter 10. Venturing deeper into the reconstructed mansion, Sebastian was reminded of his past encounters with the psychotic Ruvik. The serial killer had once hijacked the minds of his victims using a primitive version of the Stemps system. But Sebastian had thought him dead years ago. This tech seems more advanced than anything Ruvik had before, Kidman observed as they passed rooms full of strange machinery and bubbling tubes. She was right. Someone had clearly refined Ruvik's methods in the years since. But was Ruvik himself behind it all? Or had someone else simply replicated his work? Sebastian did not know yet. Either way, he had to stop them. Down in the mansion's basement, they came across a row of pod-like containers filled with human brains, kept alive by pulsing cables and fluids. A nearby computer screen labeled them all as test subjects. My God, these poor souls, Joseph whispered. It seemed Ruvik, or someone equally deranged, had expanded his experiments on unwilling victims. Progressing through the laboratory, they eventually located a massive glass tube at its center that contained what looked like a living human brain. But surrounding it, a tangle of wires and metal formed a grotesque biomechanical body. And hovering within was the unmistakable face of Ruvik. Sebastian recoiled at the sight. No doubt now, we're inside Ruvik's world, he muttered. The serial killer had somehow fused his consciousness to the Stemps system itself. Ruvik's giant form stirred, as if sensing their presence. Sebastian realized they stood little chance against such a colossus here. They would need to find Ruvik's real brain and destroy it in order to banish his control over Stem. We know you're in here, Ruvik. This ends now. Sebastian shouted in defiance. Throughout the mansion, Ruvik's voice echoed back in sinister amusement. There was no escape from a realm where he was God. But Sebastian was ready to fight him to the very end. Chapter 11. Leaving the expansive laboratory, Sebastian led his team deeper into the maze-like mansion. Ruvik clearly knew they were here now and would be on high alert. But they had the advantage of pressing the attack while his guard was down. Ruvik's brain must be vulnerable somewhere in this twisted world he's created, Sebastian reasoned. Finding and destroying it could be their only way back to reality. They passed through galleries of disturbing art, paintings and sculptures, depicting twisted anatomies, suffering and death, all reflections of Ruvik's psychosis given form. The mansion itself seemed alive, shifting around them subtly. Staying alert for attacks, Sebastian's group soon detected sounds of anguish echoing from somewhere ahead. Following the cries led them to a medical theater where Ruvik's earliest experiments took place. There on an operating table was Leslie, the troubled boy Ruvik had first honed his brainwave manipulation abilities on years ago. The poor lad was still reliving past traumas inflicted by Ruvik. We have to help him, Kidman said, rushing over to free Leslie from the restraints. The boy recoiled in fear briefly, but then seemed to recognize he was among friends now. Still, Leslie only muttered incoherently. you're safe now, Kidman soothed gently. Sebastian hoped Leslie might know more about Ruvik's operation here, but further questioning would have to wait. Ominous sounds of approach echoed through the mansion. We need to keep moving, Sebastian said, helping Kidman guide Leslie along protectively. With parts of Ruvik's memories now distorting against his will, they were disrupting his control. But he would lash back somehow soon. Chapter 12. Fleeing through the maze-like halls with Leslie in tow, Sebastian realized Ruvik's hold on this nightmare reality was weakening. Runes and hallways warped violently, previously stable architecture crumbling away to reveal a swirling void beyond. Everything's destabilizing. I think banishing him fully is the only way out now, Joseph observed. Sebastian nodded. We just have to find the Sonofabich's brain, destroy it, and this whole damned contraption should collapse. Easier said than done, but it was their best hope. The environment fluctuated more wildly the deeper they went. Hallways looped back recursively. Gaps in the floor led to abysses, and objects took on impossible shapes straight out of the surreal paintings adorning the walls. Reality itself was coming undone. Eventually, they located a sealed-off section of the labyrinth guarded by twisted creatures that seemed to crawl directly out of the walls. Ruvik must have something important hidden back there, Sebastian reasoned. Battling their way through the malformed guardians, they ascended into a tower that appeared endlessly tall. At its apex floated a pulsating brain sealed inside an orb of conductive fluid and cables. Ruvik's true core, the conduit by which he controlled Stem. We need to get up there and destroy that brain. It's the only way to stop him permanently, Sebastian said. But no obvious path presented itself upward. They would have to ascend by any means necessary. Joseph created distractions while Kidman helped Leslie climb. Sebastian fought off attacks from horrors spawned by the failing stem system. Together they ascended the impossible tower through brute force and teamwork. At the top, Sebastian gripped a metal pipe. End of the line, Ruvik. He smashed the glass orb, shattering it completely. As the brain within liquefied, reality shuddered one final time, before collapsing into a void. Chapter 13. Sebastian slowly regained consciousness, blinking through the haze of nausea and disorientation. Destroying Ruvik's brain core had evidently ejected them all from Stem's artificial reality. But to where? Nearby, Kidman and Joseph were also recovering their wits. The Gothic interior of Ruvik's mansion surrounded them once more, but there was a strange transparency to it now, as if they were seeing two realities superimposed. What is this place? Kidman wondered aloud. The question sent a chill through Sebastian. Had they even escaped one prison only to find themselves captive in another? Leslie was nowhere to be found. With Ruvik's core gone, the boy must have been freed from the murderer's clutches at last. Small comfort for the years of trauma inflicted on him, but hopefully Leslie found some measure of peace now. Cautiously, Sebastian's team explored the decrepit mansion. Splintered memories of Ruvik's twisted past still lingered, but fainter as if drained of their former power. Searching an upstairs office lined with arcane anatomical texts, Joseph called out, "Over here, I found something." Inside the room was a window looking out upon a head-mounted device sitting atop a strange machine. Cables snaked away from it into the surrounding shadows. Sebastian thought he spotted flickering computer monitors in the gloom as well. Is that Stem? He wondered aloud. The implications were ominous. If so, destroying Ruvik's core had merely freed them from one portion of Stem while others remained intact. Kidman looked uneasy. We must still physically be connected somewhere. This isn't over yet. Sebastian slammed a fist into his palm. Ruvik may be gone, but Stem itself clearly lived on. And they were still trapped inside. Their only choice was to journey deeper and find wherever their physical bodies were linked to this technological netherrealm. Only then could they cut ties completely and wake up in the real world once more. The final battle awaited. Chapter 14. Sidearms raised, Sebastian led the team out of the office and deeper into the crumbling Stem environment. Glitching architecture and pieces of Ruvik's memories continued to manifest around them as they descended stone stairwells into the true depths. They seemed close to the core now, the machinery keeping them all captive in this virtual limbo. Cables snaked along the walls, pulsing with stolen bioelectricity and consciousness. Runes flickered with digital artifacts and broken holograms. "This way," Joseph said, directing them towards a heavy vault-like door. It groaned open, unveiling a sprawling laboratory filled with strange machinery, glass tubes, and computers. At the center rested 3 mechanical pods hooked to a towering Stem terminal. Even dormant, the system seemed poised like a waiting spider. Approaching cautiously, Sebastian looked into the pods one by one. Each held an unconscious person connected by a tangle of cables and IVs, himself, Kidman, and Joseph. "Our bodies, so we are still physically linked to Stem," Sebastian observed grimly. This machinery was the key to finally breaking free. Kidman immediately moved to open her pod and disconnect, but Sebastian stopped her. "Wait. We don't know if forcibly removing the connections will damage our minds." They had to tread carefully. "I think I can interface with the system, start a safe shutdown sequence," Joseph offered, sitting at the central terminal. His technical skills would be invaluable if they could avoid tripping any failsafes. As Joseph typed rapidly at the console, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. Stem did not want to release its prey. Sebastian and Kidman stood ready to fight if necessary while Joseph worked. "Just a bit more, got it?" Joseph shouted over the din. With one last keystroke, he initiated an emergency disconnect. The pods hissed open, cables detaching and IVs retracting. Sebastian stumbled out, suddenly feeling control of his physical body return fully. Kidman and Joseph regained themselves as well. Together, they had overcome Stem's hold. Now they just had to escape this place. Sebastian prayed he would soon wake to see the real world again, no matter how grim reality seemed after this nightmare. Chapter 15. Free of the Stem pods at last, Sebastian led his team through the glitching ruins of the laboratory as they searched for an exit. The entire virtual environment felt even more unstable now, like a dying dream fighting to cling to coherence before the final fade to black. Up ahead, a large window offered a view outside of the complex for the first time. But Sebastian froze as he glimpsed what lay beyond. Instead of open sky or earth, a swirling fractal vortex stretched to infinity in every direction. There was no physical reality here at all, only the digital limbo of Stem itself. "My God, we're still stuck in virtual space," Sebastian realized aloud. Destroying Ruvik's core and escaping the pods had not been enough. Stem still had them captive. "There must be a way to transfer our consciousness fully out of here," Kidman theorized. "Like a virtual exit point." Joseph hurried over to a console nearby. If I can hack the system through this terminal, maybe I can locate a backdoor of some kind. As Joseph worked, Sebastian stood vigil. The terminal screen glitched violently, code flashing by at high speed. Stem did not want them finding a way out of its grasp. Finally, Joseph shouted out, "Got something, there's a hidden partition. Some kind of experimental override to digitize consciousness directly out of Stem. That could be our way out. Can you activate it?" Sebastian asked tensely. Joseph's fingers flew across the keys. "I think so. Route our minds through the emergency partition before Stem can stop us. But it looks like a one-way trip. We'll have just seconds to go through." "We'll go together then," Sebastian said, gripping Joseph and Kidman's shoulders. On the terminal screen, a portal was opening. "Now, Joseph." Sebastian focused his mind as Joseph triggered the override. For a brief moment, he felt his consciousness become pure information before rematerializing back to reality. Chapter 16. With a gasp, Sebastian jolted upright. He blinked rapidly, struggling to make sense of his surroundings after escaping virtual captivity. He was sitting in a large metal chair, surrounded by machinery and computers. Cables snaked away from the helmet apparatus lifted off his head. Nearby, Joseph and Kidman were also regaining consciousness from their nightmare ordeal linked to Stem. For a brief, panicked moment, Sebastian worried they were still captive. But the smell of oil, electricity, and concrete told him this was blessed physical reality once more. Shakily standing up, Sebastian studied the strange complex they now occupied. It resembled a bizarre cross between a laboratory, computer server facility, and factory. The walls and high ceilings were lined with huge pipes and heavy cables that pulsed with menacing energies. "Where the hell are we?" Joseph wondered aloud. The architecture and advanced machinery were unfamiliar to them all. Before Sebastian could hazard a guess, muffled gunfire and shouts rang out from somewhere above. It seemed they were not alone here, whoever had constructed this bizarre facility. And a battle was raging through its twisting corridors. "We need to get to higher ground, figure out what's going on," Sebastian said, grabbing a fallen submachine gun. Whatever nightmares Stem had just put them through, he knew how to handle real-world fights. Ascending a nearby gantry staircase, they cautiously made their way towards the sounds of combat. The unmistakable percussion of gunplay and grenades grew louder from an indoor overlook ahead. Approaching carefully, Sebastian peered down over a railing. Several floors below, he could see armed tactical teams engaged in a fierce firefight with things. Creatures not of this earth. Twisted, pale-skinned humanoids moving with uncanny speed and aggression, even under heavy fire. Sebastian recoiled. My God, it can't be. Had their escape merely freed them from one portion of Stem into another still inhabited by its vile creations? Chapter 17. Stunned by the sight unfolding below, Sebastian quickly realized these were no Stem-spawned creatures. The things battling the tactical teams moved with a feral physicality no virtual simulation could match. No, impossibly it seemed Ruvik's designs had been made real with cloning bats and biotech. This is a goddamn monster factory. Sebastian realized whoever was behind this complex had used Ruvik's research as a blueprint for engineering actual living horrors. The implications were chilling. Checking his weapon, Sebastian knew they would have to fight their way through these abominations to escape this place. He had survived the Stemps system's nightmare. He could handle its bastard offspring in the real world. Descending towards the combat below, Sebastian and his team used the gantries and cover to avoid detection. The creatures moved with frightening speed, clawing through body armor and Kevlar as if paper. Even the tactical team's heavy weapons only slowed them briefly. Once close enough, Sebastian opened fire on the pale monsters while Kidman and Joseph provided cover. With their flank exposed, the creatures shrieked in rage and turned their focus upward towards Sebastian's team. The fight was on. Sebastian kept firing controlled bursts as the creatures charged up the nearby ladders and stairwells. Their milk-white eyes overflowed with blood, and gaping maws lay open hungrily. But Sebastian's aim was true. He dropped them one after another before they could rip into him. Working in coordination with Kidman and Joseph, they battled through waves of the horrific clones towards an elevator checkpoint guarded by the remaining TAC team members. Inside, they could ride to the surface and escape this madhouse. With shotgun and rifle blazing, Sebastian provided cover while Kidman helped usher Joseph and the wounded guards into the elevator. Once all were safely inside, Sebastian dove through the closing doors as claws raked the air behind him. "Gotta be a way out topside," Sebastian panted as the elevator rose upwards away from the creature's shrieks of rage. He had survived Stem, and now its offspring. Nothing could stop him from seeing the light of day again. Chapter 18. The elevator finally halted at the top floors of the complex. Sebastian realized they were inside some kind of science facility or laboratory, judging by the sterile interior. But no researchers were present, only more tactical response teams trading gunfire with pale humanoid creatures loose in the halls. "Stay sharp, we're getting out of this goddamn place," Sebastian said, leading his team towards the sound of helicopters nearby. Their extraction point. They passed offices and cubicles stained with blood, following the signs towards the building's lobby. All around, the facility showed signs of a massive containment breach. The creatures had escaped en masse from wherever they were bred downstairs. A few survivor researchers and guards joined Sebastian's group as they fought their way through the overrun corridors. With shotguns and rifles blazing, they blew apart any of the cloned monstrosities that came running. Finally, they reached the main foyer, where a platoon of guards had barricaded to make a stand. Through the glass doors, Sebastian could see the spotlights of helicopters waiting on the pad outside. "This way, her," Sebastian shouted, directing the survivors towards the exit. More creatures were descending through the facility's central stairwell to give chase. They had to hold this position just a few moments longer. Laying down suppressive fire against the advancing horde, Sebastian guarded the survivors while Kidman led them out the doors towards the waiting choppers. Joseph tossed the last of their grenades back down the hallway, consuming a dozen pale figures in the explosion. "Go, go!" Sebastian yelled as he retreated backwards, rifle trained on the creatures as his partners made it outside. With the rest of the survivors safe, now was his chance. Sebastian sprinted the last steps and leaped aboard the chopper just as it lifted off the pad. From the air, they watched flames engulf the complex, incinerating any trace of the horrors cooked up inside. It was over at last. They had escaped a living nightmare. Chapter 19. As the extraction chopper flew them all to safety, Sebastian tried to process everything he had experienced. The grisly scene at Beacon Mental Hospital, the grotesque visions inside Stem, and now this laboratory breeding abominations. He wasn't sure what was real anymore. Nearby, Kidman and Joseph looked equally haunted. They had all endured profound trauma escaping the schemes of some madman playing God. At least the tactical teens had blown the whole inhumane operation straight to hell. But questions still plagued Sebastian, who had orchestrated such nightmares based on Ruvik's designs. And why drag himself and his partner's minds into Stem in the first place? Someone clearly wanted them out of the way while conducting their vile experiments. As the chopper set down at a secure government airbase, teens were already waiting to debrief them and begin investigating in force. Sebastian tried his best to describe everything they had witnessed. The creatures, the virtual STEM world, the clandestine research complex. In the following days, the scope of the horror they had uncovered became clearer. A corrupted executive named Theodore Wallace had covertly expanded the abandoned STEM trials into a deranged human cloning program, producing biological weapons based on Ruvik's research. But Sebastian took some solace that his actions in STEM itself had cut off Wallace's ability to monitor his team remotely through the system. That had allowed them to eventually escape and expose the operation. Some horrors could never be fully erased, but at least he had dragged this particular nightmare into the light, where it could finally be destroyed. Sebastian looked forward to rebuilding some semblance of a normal life again. But he knew the visions from STEM would forever haunt his dreams. The psychic wounds always ran deepest. Chapter 20. In the weeks following the atrocities at Beacon Mental Hospital and the secret laboratory, Sebastian steadily regained some stability in his life, although he knew the scars ran deep inside. The horrors he witnessed would never fully heal. With Kidman and Joseph, he had helped piece together the full extent of the clandestine human experiments derived from Ruvik's twisted research. While aspects still remained classified, the government assured them those responsible faced justice. And all their nightmare creations and machinations were being systematically destroyed. Sebastian sat alone in his apartment one rainy evening, listening to the patter of water on the windows. It carried him back to that first fateful scene at Beacon, precipice of a depraved conspiracy they could scarcely comprehend at the time. Sipping a glass of whiskey, Sebastian reflected on how close he had come to losing himself fully in that digital purgatory of STEM. Even destroying Ruvik's core and escaping had required tremendous luck and perseverance. Lesser souls would have succumbed. And despite it all, life went on. Cases continued landing on Sebastian's desk at the KCPD. New distractions and routines emerged over time to keep his thoughts from straying back down those dark passages. But he knew deep down a haunted quality permeated his very being now. Some stains simply could not be cleansed. The whiskey could only calm those roiling memories so much before they clawed their way to the surface again. Images of blood and undulating flesh, the stench of rust and death. Those pale, haunting eyes overflowing with crimson menace. Sebastian finished his glass and sighed. He had survived the mind of a killer and the consequences of trying to play God. But even back safely in the real world, he realized no one truly escapes themselves. The ghost of STEM would always be with him now, just waiting behind closed eyes to appear once more. The end.